What's up, everyone? Today we're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of invasive species. So let's get at it. Hi everybody, it's your host Thad with Thad Mini Outdoors. Today we're going to get in depth on some invasive species, the good, the bad, and the ugly of them. Let's start off with what is an invasive species. Actually, let's start off with my completely barren bait wall. No rods, no catch boards, no baits, no tactical fishing, no spear point, no nothing. And the reason behind that is I just got back from the Kayak Bassmaster Series number 6 on Toledo Bend, and I have not unpacked yet. So don't worry, the fishing content's still gonna be rolling. I just have to unpack. Now, invasive species, the good and bad, the ugly of them. What is an invasive species? An invasive species can be any species that is not naturally occurring in an area. So, in a state like, let's say, Alaska doesn't have largemouth bass naturally, someone brings in largemouth bass and puts them in the lakes and rivers there, those are now an invasive species. Are they endemic to the Americas? Yes. Are they native to that area? No. So invasive species doesn't mean it comes from another country like Asian carp or snakehead or the cichlids and such that we see, the clown knifefish that we see like down in Florida, and snakeheads up north. It could be the blue cats that have now just overrun the Chesapeake Bay area. It could be the largemouth bass that have overrun multiple lakes and rivers and streams and areas. It could be the Asian carp that are not supposed to be here, whether they're the grass carp, the big head, the silver carp, you know, the jumping carp that people see, the ones that have like taken out my ribs and about giving me a concussion during alligator season, blowing down the rivers with them. Those are all invasive species. So let's get into the good and the bad and the ugly invasive species. Let's start off with the good. Some invasive species that do not occur naturally here, again, just not naturally occurring species, are actually good for the environment. Honeybees. Honeybees are not naturally found in the Americas. The honeybee everyone loves and they cultivate and gives us honey and pollinate, those are European honeybees. Those are not naturally found in America. But we are pretty self-reliant on them, or pretty reliant on them for pollination and other aspects. So good invasive species, there's a bird like smoking the outside of my garage door there. So if y'all hear that, that's what it is. They're trying to get their way in, but they're not making it to that metal door. I hate to tell them. But you know, some invasive species can be good. Let's look at a controversial, but in my opinion, good invasive species, the snakehead. Primarily the snakehead found up in, you know, the Chesapeake Bay area, the Maryland area, the Pennsylvanias, all of them through there. Let's look at those snakeheads. In my opinion, this is just solely me as a biologist. You know, I'm down south, they're not really prevalent in my state, so solely as a biologist, and I'm going to catch so much flack for this, I consider the snakehead a good invasive species. Here are my reasonings for that. This is all backed up by research done by independent studies and conservations and DNRs and stuff. So this is research I'm going off of. The snakehead is a good invasive species because they help keep in check other invasive species such as carp, such as largemouth bass in the area they're found in up north. Yes, a lot of the areas that the snakeheads are in, largemouth bass are in. That's what the big hubbubaloo was about. All the snakeheads are going to ruin our bass population. Bass are invasive up there anyway. You hate me all you want. Science is science, facts are facts. Largemouth bass are invasive in those areas. They're not naturally occurring there. They've been there for over 100 years now in some of these places. But they're not natural. They're not naturally occurring. But the snakeheads, they do eat some largemouth bass. But they've improved the fisheries. You're not catching as many, but you are catching bigger, higher quality, more fit fish than areas where they're not. That's for me talking to anglers. That's for me looking at DNR aspects, looking at creel surveys, looking at all kinds of different facts. Snakeheads have had a positive impact overall now. This is a positive impact overall. There was some detriment when they first came because it threw the ecosystem out of balance. Now the ecosystem has rebalanced with them in it, and they're helping control the non-native species in those areas. So overall, and come at me in the comments, I'm here for discussion. But overall, snakeheads have had a positive impact on the areas for which they're now found in that whole, the whole northeastern part of the world that they're in. Pennsylvania, Maryland, that whole area, the snakeheads, they're one of the very delicious eating fish. I've heard multiple people say they're some of the best freshwater eating fish. And don't confuse these. They look a lot like our native bowfin. They do. They look a lot like our native bowfin species, but they're not. They're completely different. And in some states it is, or some areas it still is illegal for once you catch them to release them back. But some areas, as long as you catch them out of one body of water and release them back in that body of water, that's completely legal, and that's okay. But these invasive species overall, in my opinion, they have more positive than negative aspects to them. So snakeheads, invasive species, they get the thumb up. Now, let's look at the bad invasive species. We're going to start off with the Asian carp. They are absolutely detrimental to any ecosystem they get in. We're talking about the silver carp, big head carp primarily, the jumping carps, ones that can get 50, 60, 70 pounds. You're going down the river, you see there's hundreds of them jumping. They're extremely detrimental to any ecosystem they get into. They don't really have a lot of predators, except maybe some other stuff like alligator gar, snakeheads in some cases. When they're small, a largemouth bass can eat them. The real small fry, crappie can. But they reproduce in such large quantities and so fast. Once they're in the air, there's no stopping them really. And they have spread astronomically throughout the Mississippi Basin, all the way up toward the Great Lakes. And I pray they never get to the Great Lakes. They're already in places like Kentucky Lake. They're all up and through Mississippi, Louisiana, parts of Texas, Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, into Kentucky Lake and Kentucky. So anywhere that those bodies of water is touched and there's ways to lock and stuff, you'll find these carp in there. They're, again, absolutely detrimental to anywhere they get into. So that's a bad invasive species. Next, kiss flack on this too, trout. Your brown trouts and even rainbows in some parts of the country are highly invasive. They're brought in and put in, and they're causing absolute detrimental effects, especially in places that we had natural steelhead runs and even other salmonoid species, like Colorado and Washington, that whole out west area, where a lot of those native species, the native cutthroats and stuff, just cannot outcompete the rainbows and stuff like that. And a lot of states have bounties on these trout. They are just absolutely detrimental. They're introduced invasive species. Some places trout are naturally found here. Some species, like I think the brown trout and stuff, were introduced from Germany. They're native to Germany, not America. And while these species have been here for so long, they almost seem like they should be a native species, and they're so interwoven into what we know as fishing and fly fishing and trout. So interwoven into all this stuff that we have just accepted them. But the truth of the matter is, these particular species are still, even though they're fun to catch, they're fantastic, they're great eating, they're great sport fish, people love them. In a lot of cases, they are extremely detrimental to your native populations, your native species in the areas from which they've been introduced. It's horrible. Another bad one, and gonna catch all the flack in the world on this one, largemouth bass and spotted bass. Horribly detrimental to the ecosystems they get introduced to. All the people who cry about the snakehead, guess what? Your largemouth bass are not native to most of those areas. Largemouth bass, not native to Japan. They have an on-site kill order in Japan in a lot of places because they're absolutely detrimental to the ecosystem. Largemouth bass is probably one of the most introduced species of fish across the world. And it's just horrible, the impacts they have on native ecosystems. They are almost like a catfish when they're put in these things. They will eat any and everything they can fit into their mouth. trust me, I love catching largemouth bass as much as the next person. I spent my life studying bass and management for trophy bass species. Doesn't mean they're not invasive species. Doesn't mean they're not bad for these areas. I hate to tell you this, but largemouth bass are detrimental to a lot of places they've been introduced. And a lot of your places is like, the California Delta, Clear Lake, these giant bass factories, the bass are not native there. They're able to outcompete all these other species of fish and allow them to grow to such a larger size. And what would really help improve bass fishing everywhere, and I'll say this in a video, every 13-inch bass and smaller you catch, take that out and eat it. Every lake that bass is in needs 20 pounds per acre taken out per year in order to have a really good fisheries. It's not just going to be Dink City. So far on the bad, we've had Asian carp, we've had multiple species of trout, and we've had largemouth bass, spotted bass too. They're horrible where they're introduced. They can interbreed with smallmouth, largemouth, anything. I mean, their genes eventually, over a few generations, will overtake what they've interbred into. So they have the possibility to wipe out a lot of your native smallmouth species, a lot of your shoal bass. If they get to those areas, they can completely devastate those species. And a lot of your newer species of bass they found throughout, if small or spotted bass stays in those areas that they're not naturally found in, because you have the Alabama and the Kentucky version, they can absolutely wreck an ecosystem and push out your native species. I love catching spots as much as the next guy. They're fun, they're aggressive, but they have the potential to do unprecedented damage to the point of wiping out native species like the shoal bass in some areas. So, fun to catch, doesn't mean they're good. So, spots going to bad and invasive where they're not naturally found. Again, guys, where bass are naturally found, they're great, they thrive. And you got northern largemouth, and you got Florida strain, and you got southern largemouth, and even here in Mississippi, I'm in central North Mississippi, the northern strain of largemouth bass was naturally here, not the Florida strain, not the southern strain, but this is where the northern strain normally was. And now we've got the interbreeding between the Floridas, and we get the F1 tigers and all that stuff. But it's neither here nor there. So we've gone over the good, which in my opinion is a snakehead, good invasive species, because they help keep in check other invasive species. It's kind of a double-edged sword there. They're great, for keeping bass populations in check. They're great eating. And overall, snakeheads have my positive approval. I'll catch flack on that, be okay. The bad, which are invasive species that are just absolutely detrimental to the environments from which they're released. You've got different parts of the country for rainbow trout. You've got largemouth bass. You've got brown trout. You've got spotted bass. We talked about the different types of Asian carp. All those, for places that are not naturally found and introduced to, are bad for them. Hate it or love it, that's the truth of it. Largemouth bass are introduced everywhere because they're fun to catch and they're a sport fish. That's the simplicity of it. Carp are accidentally released, as mankind does so often, and once they hit that waterway, there's no stopping them. Now let's talk about the ugly. Let's talk about the old big gum ugly in the room, blue cats. Blue catfish are absolutely devastating in the Northeast, where they have been introduced and released. And from some of the studies I'm reading, the Chesapeake Bay area, because blue cats can sustain a fair amount of salinity for a while, but the areas like the Chesapeake Bay and that place up through there, they are wreaking absolute havoc. So I put them as the ugly. The Chesapeake Bay right now, that whole area is famous for blue crabs. They are devastating the blue crab population to the point where commercial and recreational harvest, they're fixing to have to relook at that seriously and cut way back down on the amount of harvestable crabs. Again, it's just what I'm reading from different articles, different news, places like that. So don't shoot the messenger. I'm just going with what I'm told. But the blue cats, at least in that area, they are becoming astronomically big, astronomically quickly, because there's a bunch of prey species that are not used to having a giant mouth going through the water, sucking up any and everything that can fit into it. So the blue cats in these areas are absolutely devastating multiple species population to the point it's pushing some to the brink of extinction. So that's not really a good thing. And it's why I have them as the ugly. They're not meant to be in a lot of the waterways they are. I can't think of the big river, the Potomac. They're not supposed to be in the Potomac, but they are causing absolute devastation in those areas, wiping out fish, wiping out all kinds of prey species that other fish normally depend on, by just destroying all kinds of things. So the blue cats get the ugly for it. I love catfish. I'm from Mississippi. Catfish is king down here. Belzona is the catfish capital, of America. Mainly channel cats and farm raised, but we got blues in all our rivers. We got flatheads everywhere. Flatheads can be another devastating one if they don't, if they're ever introduced somewhere. But right now, blue cats are the big topic, because them big blues. You're talking about a fish that can, get well over 100 pounds. A guy caught a 131 pounder the other day. I've seen multiple 100+ pound cats caught this year alone. You're talking about a fish that lives a long time, gets real big, and eats anything that can fit in its mouth. I've cleaned catfish and I've seen everything from whole brim, 2 and 3 pound bass, ducks, crawfish, turtles. Saw a baby otter in a flathead one time. Just all kind. They swim in the water. That catfish goes in its mouth. There it comes to it. It's eating it. So that's another thing. That's why that's why I put the catfish as the ugly, because what they are doing is absolutely grotesque and horrible, and it is turning a fabulous fishery and blue crabbery fishery place you get blue crabs, and it's just absolutely devastating those areas. I don't really know. I know there's a famous shad run up there. I don't know what kind of effect overall it's going to have on the shad run in the next few years. But I could see it having a devastating effect on that as well. But the blue cats that's been introduced up through there, and I get it. People want to bring these fish in because they're fun to catch. They get big. It's another thing for us to catch. It's not always a good thing. I know that's why people move bass around. That's why people, snakeheads I think was released more from the aquarium trade, pet trade, and like restaurants. But I know why people put stuff in water. The carp are brought in to help regulate, and that's my state's fault in a lot of cases, to help clean up catfish ponds and keep grass out, stuff like that. Tilapia is brought as a food source. It's actually illegal to transport tilapia through the state of Mississippi without super specialized permits and permission from our DNR. But invasive species overall, just because they're native to the neighboring state and you want them in your area, doesn't mean they're not. That's a good thing if they get released. Doesn't mean they won't have devastating effects. Well, there's only one state over. Mississippi's just like Alabama. Well, it doesn't mean that even though they're one river system over, the fish that's lived in this river system for hundreds of thousands of years without ever having to deal with a largemouth bass is now being devastated by them, just wiping them out. And if you want true examples of this, look at Florida. Florida has more, I think, seems like more invasive species than it does natural species at this point. You got the pythons devastating the Everglades. The raccoon and possum populations are down 99% in some areas. So it's like wiping them out completely, eating alligators. You've got tegus, you've got green iguanas, you've got rhino iguanas, you've got togay geckos, Burmese pythons, Nile crocodiles, caimans. They found Burmese, reticulated. You got clown knife fish. You've got all kind of Oscars. You've got cichlids. You've got peacock bass. You've got the snakeheads down there, which eat a lot of the other invasive species. And now there's a place they're bringing in arapaima and all these other giant like red-tailed catfish and stuff down there to pay a bunch of money. You don't want to go fish for these things in other countries. You can fish on this part of Florida. I think that's the worst move possible, because one good hurricane and all those species are going to get loose and they're going to wreak havoc on the Everglades. But there's hope for some places. There, Thankfully, there's some invisible line that's kind of stopped carp from making it to the Great Lakes and the lock systems and stuff. There are natural species finally adapting to these invasive species and fighting back and bringing them down. There are all kind of restoration efforts. Carp are being sold for fertilizer now. All those big head carp and silver carp and stuff like that. So there's some positives coming out of this. And some invasive species are good for the environment because they're taking the place of a species that used to be there and is wiped out now, like an apex predator. That's why we have so many deer in Mississippi. We used to have wolves and cougars and all kind of stuff here, and we just don't anymore. Therefore, they're completely overrun with deer. So there's good and bad and ugly of invasive species. Some have positive effects, even though they are. Go away, mosquito. Some have positive effects, even though they are in this area. Some have detrimental negative effects. Some have ecosystem ending effects. It all just depends on what we do to stop them, what we do to prevent it. So, the good, snakeheads are on my good list. The bad, all the invasive trouts, the bass, largemouth, spotted, rainbow, and brown, and your big head carp, your silver carp, your clown knifes, your cichlids, all those have detrimental effects. And the ugly, blue cats. They're native to America, not native to those areas that are devastating right now. If y'all want to know more about invasive species, please contact your local DNR. If you see it, report it. Just because they're fun to catch doesn't mean they won't wipe out the rest of your stuff you love to catch and eat. As always, tight lines, take your kid fishing, and please wear your life jacket, y'all. If you're on the water, wear your life jacket. Too much senseless death lately. Have a good one, guys. I'm out.